Okay, we'll go ahead and begin. My name is Greg Justice. Thank you for coming today to our presentation. We have invited Heather Boyer. She's the Vice President and Executive Editor at Island Press. She's going to talk about the nonprofit publishing industry and basically how Island Press has survived for so long. Also, the fact that they are well known, kind of the preeminent sustainability publishers in the US and even internationally in this present environment of, antithetical federal policies, how they're surviving. So I'm going to hand it off to Jen Hawse.
Excellent. Thanks, Greg. So I'll be introducing Heather. Heather is an institution here at Island Press. She spent much of her career with the organization focused on crafting our built environment catalog. Her interests include transportation, the public sector and space, energy, and housing. Heather wants to help create a more livable, low-carbon urban regions that focus on the most vulnerable populations. In 2004 through 2005, Heather was a Lowe Fellow at the Harvard Graduate School of Design, where she studied land use, planning, urban design, and real estate development. She's the co-author of Resilient Cities with Peter Newman and Timothy Beatley, and a second edition of that book was published in 2017. Very pleased to have Heather here, so I'll hand that off to her.
Well, thanks, Jen. And just wanted to mention, Jen is our new partnership manager. Is working to bring together all the many partners, informal and formal, that we work with here at Island Press. And I know Meredith Harkle is here also. So I'm hoping this can be more of a conversation, because it was really, since its inception, has been a team effort at Island Press. So it was very interesting to start thinking about Island Press throughout the years in terms of how we are committed, or have been committed, to getting information out about climate change, and just how well the climate, for lack of a better word, in terms of the political climate, has changed over time. And I would say that our role is more important than ever at a time when climate change is not considered as a real issue, or even believed to be an issue, and human role in it is not acknowledged. So I'll just start with, I put together a few slides. Do I have control? Oh, okay, thank you. About Island Press and our background. And we've been doing this since 1984. We are a not-for-profit. And we started out, publishing at a time when some of these issues were seen as sort of crunchy, sort of hippie issues. The environmental movement was seen at the time. I mean, people were certainly talking about climate change, but there was still, I think, not that much information, or certainly not a belief that this was a serious issue. In 1988, James Hansen at NASA published a report about what was happening, and some sound science about why we should be concerned about these issues. And he's gotten some attention recently unfortunately, for being right, and for feeling as though he wasn't to really let people know how important that issue was at the time. So people were talking about the issue, but we didn't, I think, know as much about the seriousness of the issue, and certainly not about the human role in climate change. So in the early days of Island Press, we were publishing for traditional areas, ecosystems management, forestry, land conservation, and over time, we started to branch out into a natural progression, and for us to move into areas where we saw a need, where we could bring together different disciplines, such as urban sprawl and public health, which was one of the early books to really showed the relationship between the built environment and human health. And we do many books that I would say are related to a changing climate, but do not lead with the climate change argument. Many of the books within the built environment, I think, would fall into that category. The issue of climate is really overarching. It's something that we think about in all the books that we publish, but we may talk about, for example, with Jan Gehl's Cities for People, I'm not sure he mentions the words climate change, but everything that he talks about in terms of how we can make our cities more walkable and more livable would lower, our emissions and help us to curb the effects of a changing climate. Am I able to control the slides?
Yeah, let me actually go ahead and have you do that. So if you want to go ahead and let me stop my share screen.
I mean, there are only a few of them. I'm just,
so
they're sort of serving as my outline. So I just.
Oh, yeah. If you were to go to on your screen, your Zoom meeting screen, it should say share screen at the bottom.
Yes.
And then if you click on that, you'll take over.
Okay, well that's okay. It's telling me that I cannot start screen share while the other participant is sharing.
Oh, I ended mine.
Okay, that's fine. If you're able to just go to the next slide. I mean, there aren't that many of them, so hopefully that won't be just too disruptive if you just.
Yeah, so you might want to try it again because I'm no longer doing it.
Okay, for some reason I'm still getting that message.
Oh, that is weird. Okay, let me go ahead.
Well, and I'll just keep talking because, oh wow. So I already mentioned sort of the built environment list and so the overarching issue of climate change. We have a few issues that I'd say are overarching that all of the editors are thinking about in their various subject areas. And one of those is climate change. Another is social equity. And I would say another is energy. They're all interrelated, and just about everything we do is cross-disciplinary and sort of interrelated in some way. So we all work very closely together on these issues. So the specific lists or subject areas in which the Island Press list is loosely divided are the built environment, which has been a fairly significant one over the last few years. There's been quite a bit of interest in cities' recognition about how cities affect climate and what we can do within cities to minimize our or to lower our emissions. There's also a list on food, health, and water. And we recently published a number of books for the general trade readers, looking at how the environment affects human health. And there's also the natural world, which is really the area in which Island Press was founded. But I think the issues and how we approach the issues within the natural world has changed. For example, one of the books in the natural world area is that is underway is a graphic novel of E.O. Wilson's The Naturalist. So we're taking some information, some leaders in the field, and taking their messages and looking at new and innovative ways to convey those ideas. Well, now, thank you that we're back here. Do you mind going to the next slide? So one of the earliest books about how because we're not just writing books with the information, we are thinking every day about how we're communicating this information, how we can help the people who are on the ground, on the front lines, to convey this information in the most efficient and effective way. And one of our most popular books really about communicating ideas is a book that we first published in 2009 called Don't Be Such a Scientist. And it really is helping scientists to understand how to take the the information, the science, and also translate it into information or into accessible for format and language that people can understand. And I think the most notable thing about the new edition is you can see how much bigger the drink is now. I think that speaks to, that's a small joke, but that speaks to the current climate and what scientists are dealing with. But that has been a very timely revised edition to really address what sort of the siege that science is under in the current administration. And it does sort of talk about some of these political issues directly, as we think about and struggle with the scientists and science's role in policy. If you don't mind going to the next slide, Greg. So Island Press is still at its foundation a book publisher. It's an important part of everything that we do, but as we
Are you still there? Or seems to be having some issues.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, I apologize. It just, I'm not sure what happened. Where did I cut out?
You literally at the beginning of the slide on display.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just starting to say that, Island Press is still at its foundation, primarily a book publisher, but we realized, many years ago as we adapted and adjusted to changing times that we needed to think about other ways to get information out to the people who need it. We are, mission oriented, and we started, I guess it's 4 years ago now, the Urban Resilience Project, which is funded by the Kresge Foundation, the JPB Foundation, and it is focused on, looking at these resilient cities of the future and what resilience means, how we can get this information again to people who need it through means other than our traditional book publishing. And so it includes articles, podcasts, interviews, webinars, and we're also doing courses, many of those in conjunction with the USGBC continuing education course. And so this has been a very important part of our work, again, in communicating the ideas about many areas in which we work that are related to urban resilience. We define urban resilience fairly broadly, and it has a strong social equity component. And being able to talk about these issues and ideas and problems and possible solutions in a more timely manner. I mean, book publishing is getting a little bit faster, but it's still 6 to 9 months from the time we have a manuscript to the time we have a printed book. A lot is happening in the areas in which we work every single day. We also have been using these, the short form program within the Urban Resilience Project is more nimble. We can reach new audiences. We can, it's been really instrumental in expanding our network and getting some of these ideas to new audiences. And I know that's part of what we wanted to talk about today is really, in this current political climate, how are we reaching beyond the choir, getting these messages to, say, people in, if you can go to the next slide, in red states specifically. It's been part of the Urban Resilience Project. Last year, we partnered with a media project, a progressive media project, and it allowed us to place op-eds in a variety of newspapers across the country. So we had pieces in papers in red states, like the Argus Leader, and also national outlets that may be more widely read, like the USA Today. So in the last year, we published over 50 articles, op-eds, and blog posts with potential viewing, given the reach of 240 million. We can track the reach of our books only really in sales. It's harder to see views. It's hard, it's just a different way to see who, how, where the information is going. That's been critical to, I think, to the movement, and to our work here at Island Press. We've also had a partnership with Infinite Earth Radio, done podcasts. They've reached more than 2,000 listeners per episode. And we've been doing webinars with the Security and Sustainability Forum. We had 1,200 people who registered for a February webinar on climate justice, changes health, local, tribal, global, and generational. So we really feel like this has been just essential to our message, our ability to adapt and adjust and to get this information out in real time. We have many of our book authors who work with the short form editor to write about the issues in their book and reach an audience that may not, pick up a book or may lead people to the book. So it's also, been helpful to get people to show them the next steps to, where to get more information now that they're aware of these issues related to climate change. If you don't mind going to the next slide, I feel like I could talk for quite a while about Island Press, so I'm trying to watch the time. I just wanted to, talk for a little while and then have a conversation and maybe respond to questions about what we're doing. And as I said, Jen is our partnership manager, which is also a really important part of what we're doing, because every time we partner with another group, we sort of expand our network to include the partners network. And it's another way that we're reaching or expanding our audience and getting the message out beyond the choir. These are all the different ways in which you can follow what Island Press is doing. Of course, we're in social media, not just on the Island Press page and Twitter handle, but also through URP, which is our Urban Resilience Project. And they work closely together, so we don't get a bunch of information that is repetitive. So it's sort of an exciting time for us in getting our message out in a rather bleak time politically. I just think we're all very committed to getting this message out, and that's, I guess, why, Greg, you had asked how we're able to do this. And we are a unique publisher, as you can see, because we do much more than books. We are a not-for-profit. Every time I talk to another publisher, they joke about how they're not actually not-for-profit, but we are structured as a not-for-profit, which allows us to undertake some projects like the Urban Resilience Project, and to do things that are very much aligned with our mission, without constantly having to look at the bottom line and to rely solely on the revenues from our book sales. So that's a short version of how we're able to continue. Just a lot of people who see the value in the work and the message that we're communicating, and a lot of dedicated people, within Island Press, to make this happen and to continue to innovate. And I hope everyone's still there. I'm worried maybe I cut out again, and I've just been talking to myself for the last 10 minutes. I just heard.
Okay. You're still. First of all, you could talk about Island Press forever if you want. That's fine. So if anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat feature. I'll be able to read them out. This way we could centralize them and so forth. I'll start with a few things. So I'm just curious, a lot of, maybe this might be more with the newspaper industry, but I'm curious if it's spilling over toward publishing, especially with nonprofit. So the rise of ebooks and other electronic formats, is that something that's taking hold at Island as well?
Yes, and thank you for bringing that up, since I did not mention digital. Well, we obviously have our digital project with IRB, or I mean, just about everything we do on IRB is online. But in terms of our books, just about every book that we publish now is also available in digital format. And I think in the entire book publishing industry, they saw a big surge in sales and interest in EPUBs. But that is really flattened out. People were talking about the end of the print book, and it hasn't happened. There's still, it's still a relatively small percentage of overall sales. It's great for people to have that opportunity to read things online or on the Kindle, and everything we do, is available for your Kindle or your Nook or your Apple, or your iPad. But we still see, especially in the design fields, because many of our books certainly on the built environment list are of interest to urban designers and architects, and many of them, especially the heavily designed ones, still sell primarily in print format. I think some designers really like to have the product, and many of them just don't look the same, say, on a Kindle. So I think that the area in which the move to digital publishing has affected us most has been, sorry, I'm just looking at a message. That has affected us the most has been in academic publishing, because there are significant, textbook projects that are online textbook projects, and a fair amount of pressure for academics to use resources that are digital. And Jen, I apologize. I saw a message, but I didn't catch it. Okay, I think.
She's asking if you could speak about the audiobook world.
Oh, thank you. There it is. Yes, and that is also exciting. There was a New York Times article just a few weeks ago about I'm trying to remember a major author who was publishing his book in audio book format only, which was sort of shaking up some people in the publishing world. But our subrights person recently orchestrated a deal where we're doing it's not through Audible, it's through I think a smaller group and they are doing a few of our new books. I think there are 4 or 5 that we have already agreed to have converted to audiobooks. We have had some audiobooks in the past through Audible, but they're mostly interested in big sort of general trade books, and which we do, general trade books, but there just hasn't been a big part of what we've done. So we're very hopeful for this new project that some of our books will, or more of our books will be available in that format. I think it is a really exciting and dynamic format. So we're happy to be doing more in that area. And I think that the audience for Audible books is definitely growing. And there are some areas that I think are not been fully tapped. Like there are people who cannot otherwise read or access books who may be able to listen to an audiobook. And that's another way, in which we can get our information out to a broad audience is through this not new format, but through taking advantage of this new format and this new opportunity to convert our books to audio.
It's very interesting because I was actually reading about, so the two largest growing demographics in the U.S. are obviously the baby boomers and then millennials and those born after. And research shows that they actually do not like ebooks, but most people assume that they do because, this is potentially a generation that's born and raised with this type of technology. But there's also research showing that your mind does not absorb as much information reading something from a screen as if you're actually reading it from a book. So I found that interesting as well. Yeah,
and I find it really interesting. And we did an experiment for, I guess, approximately a year when there's, when ebooks were sort of surging. And actually, there are some publishing groups that popped up around the e-only publishing idea. You had Atavis, which is still around, and Byliner, and we did something we're calling essentials, which were shorter books that were electronic only. And it was very interesting. We constantly got requests for print editions. The review world, I think, wasn't quite ready for it. They didn't know what to do with an e-only book, and it was a very interesting experiment. I mean, some of them did well if the author was really plugged into social media and networked, but they had to be promoted in a different way. And just, again, many people requested the print edition, and there wasn't any. So we just decided we needed to return to an option where we had a print book as a foundation and would create the digital editions around that, and audio, digital, and any other formats.
So I have a quick question. And just to remind listeners and attendees as well, feel free to go to the chat feature to add any questions if you have that, and I'll read that to Heather. So Governor Brown has actually called in California in mid-September the Global Climate Action Summit. It's going to kind of be the preeminent event on climate action. Will Island be involved with that in any way?
That is a very good question. We have been trying to get more information about it. I was at the American Institute of Architects meeting last week, and Ed Masria was talking about how he's going to have one day where he's, doing something about Architecture 2030, and everyone there was chatting about how challenging they found it to get information about what's happening. We have a number of authors who are interested in finding out more. I mean, I guess the short answer is that we don't currently have plans to be directly involved, but we're trying to figure out a way, because we have many books that are relevant. We have a number of authors who actually, who worked for Jerry Brown in the first administration, like Peter Calthorpe and Sim Vanderine, Harrison Fraker. And, a lot of people who are sort of directly connected to and continue to work on issues related to the built environment and climate change. So we're still trying to figure out where there might be an opportunity for us and where we could, that would be most efficient and effective. We do have one editor who works on the Natural World List who is located in California, who may go. So we're still figuring it out and sort of waiting more information on exactly where those opportunities might be. So, will you be involved in that at all, Greg?
Yes, we actually are requested to cover it, obtaining media registration. We haven't heard back. What's kind of interesting is actually the previous governor when Schwarzenegger had the climate summits, he actually opened it for everyone. So, you know, from industry, citizens, students, and so forth. And Governor Brown, who I would have thought would be way more into getting as many people into this and so forth and invited, his climate summits has actually mostly been invite only, which I find kind of sad.
Yeah.
So it would be, again, we haven't heard anything back. We'll keep you updated, but we are trying to get that because it does appear that this really will be, you know, kind of the pinnacle summit, at least in the tenure of this federal administration.
Right. Right. It sounds interesting. A little bit I've heard about it, but that's too bad that it's invite only. It sounds a little bit more like even in like a UN Habitat meeting, there are things that are happening that are for the public, even, and just parts of it are invite only. But anyway, it will, maybe some things will crop up sort of around that meeting that are open to anyone.
So as you mentioned, the California Green Academy, also one of our programs is Transportica, which is dedicated to sustainable transportation. Our motto is mobility meeting the triple bottom line. And next month will be our third anniversary of our monthly book club, where we highlight things related to sustainable transportation. So publications that are related to the social equity aspect, financial obligation, responsibility, and of course, environmental considerations for that. I'm just curious, has Island been involved with any other organizations on a kind of a book club or something of that nature?
We were, many years ago, we had a book club with USGBC, US Green Building Council. And I think it lasted a little over a year at that time. They were growing very rapidly, and we kept working with people who, moved to a different department or were doing something else. And so I think we lost our person there, but I thought it was a great idea. We would together choose a few books every month. We started to have them, around themes. Few books every month that they would recommend to their members, and then their members would get a discount. And these certainly weren't all Island Press books. We would include at least one Island Press book, but many of them were from other publishers working in related areas. So it was really useful for me to see. Part of the editor's job is to make sure they know what else is out there and what else is being published and how everything fits together. So to look more closely at what else was out there. And then, it was great for us to be working very closely with USGBC. And then we fulfilled all of the orders, and it was a nice network for us. But in terms of actual book clubs, that's the only example I can think of. And there is a book club, a planners book club here in New York that has done a few, Island Press books, and we were able to get authors to come in, and that's certainly not a formal Island Press thing, but just something that we've partnered with informally.
For Transportica's monthly book club, Island Press has not been just our only publisher and so forth, but if you look at it, about 2/3 of the publications has come from Island, just because you folks have really been spot on with what type of publications we're looking for. And our board has even created a policy about selections for that book club. And again, Island consistently hits all the requirements that we're looking for. So in case anyone's wondering, why Transportica is overwhelmingly having Island Press publications, that's why.
Well, that's great. Well, and if you ever get feedback from the book club on specific book or topic, or where there's a gap in the literature, those are things that we'd love to hear. Where the needs are. That's what we need to figure out how to fill those.
Well, yeah, in our third year, our big focus is focusing on female and other minority authors. So
Mm-hmm.
we have done all that we can to, promote, again, female people of color authors and so forth, but we just have not found a lot of that material. So for this third year, our board has really asked us to focus on, bringing forward female authors and so forth. And that's one thing that, sadly, we're not saying a lot of. We know it's out there. We're just not finding it a lot of mainstream.
Yeah, yeah. We also are working to diversify our authors, our sort of base of authors, and it is sometimes challenging in the fields in which we work, which are not always very diverse, and it's something we're very committed to. We have, I think, certainly more female authors, but yeah, it's there's still, a lot of white men out there writing about these issues and working on these issues, which is, and many of them are doing great work, but I think we really need to hear from other voices, and we're working on that.
Yeah, for us in particular, it's about different perspectives, and that's something that we're hoping to capture as well. Next question. What is your next book? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to mention very, very quickly, just on that front, within our Urban Resilience Project, we actually have had much more success in raising up voices of diverse authors. So maybe there's a way to connect you, I don't know if you're just working with book authors, but maybe some of the people we've been working with on our Urban Resilience Project. Anyway, next book. So next book to edit or next book to write?
Either or. Well, specifically on write.
Specifically on write?
Yeah.
That is a really good question. I haven't thought about it. With the Resilient Cities book, I had worked with Peter Newman and Tim Beatley on enough projects. I think Tim Beatley has now published 15 books with us. But I knew them well enough to be able to tell them that I thought with Resilient Cities, when they sent the project in, that they really needed someone to help them to update, the information they had and the projects, and the field was moving so quickly. And they said, okay, well, why don't you do that? So that's how I got on board with that project. But I certainly wasn't at the time looking to be more involved in the book. I actually, I would love, someday to work on another book in that capacity or to write one, but I feel like my strength and my, the way I could best contribute to the field and to our mission is through acquiring and editing books on the built environment. So I don't have any plans to be involved in a writing project right now, and I'll see there may be an opportunity, and I would jump at it. But right now, I'm really focused on we're increasing the number of books that we're doing every year, and so we're just want to do that in the smartest and most efficient way possible. But we have a lot going on in terms of growing our list and working together with all of the programs and partners we have right now. But we have a lot of exciting books coming out this fall. That there's, I think on the slide I have Jeff Speck's Walkable City Rules. We have a new transit atlas, and it's a very exciting fall. But it's also been a very busy time. So I don't think I'll be writing anything anytime soon.
So we did have a chat question come forward asking what's the next book you're very excited about coming out either this fall or perhaps in the next spring.
In the fall, we did just have the Bruntlett, Melissa and Chris Bruntlett's book, Building the Cycling City, just printed, and that's very exciting. It's a very well written book, but also I have it in my hands here, and it's very exciting to see that the first fall book coming out. But I do think that Jeff Speck's Walkable City Rules is the one I'm most excited about. I feel like I've been working in this area for quite some time. I start to feel like, I've learned a few things here and there, but when I read Jeff's book and the way that he described the rules and some of the examples he had from places, Oklahoma City and St. Louis, rather than your New York and San Francisco's, and showed how some of these ideas worked. I found myself walking around the city saying, "Oh, that could really use a number 25, or that really needs a 97." And it was a really just interesting way to think about what's possible in making our cities more walkable. So I'm pretty excited about that one. We also have a book on the Kita, which is a really interesting story on the natural systems list. I already mentioned the Wilson graphic novel, which is probably another year and a half in a way, but is pretty exciting. I mean, there's so many cool graphic novels, and we did the cartoon guide to climate change, which was really our first foray into that type of book that is graphic or visual in that way, and it was very successful. And this the graphic novel is really something that came from within the press, from the editor and our publisher, and it really helped to think about what that book could be and make it happen. So it's a very exciting project on a number of levels. And in the spring, we're starting to look forward to the spring, and there are some, Patrick Condon at UBC is writing another book, but he also just threw his hat into the ring to become mayor of Vancouver on a platform of addressing the affordable housing crisis. So it's sort of exciting to see some of his ideas playing out in his campaign. So that's a pretty exciting project as well. So I think I also mentioned the Transit Atlas from Christoph Spieler, which maps the 47 cities in the U.S. with transit systems. And he talks about what these cities have done right, and very often, unfortunately, what went wrong, which is very often lack of political support or funding, or people who actively were trying to defeat a transit project. And it talks very honestly about how these issues relate to issues of sort of race and economic equity issues. So it's more than just an atlas. I feel like that it's a pretty exciting project for us, and one that you may be interested in, Greg.
We're excited because next month we've actually chosen for the Transportica book club selection Barbara Brown Wilson's Resilience for All.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, part of the reason why we're excited is, unfortunately, sustainability in general has the three major elements: the environmental considerations, financial, and so forth, and the third being social equity. And just that's something that's rarely talked about in sustainability. And so her book really is kind of a pinnacle of putting forward social equity, what is social equity, and so forth. How do we include much more populations in resilience, sustainability, and so forth? So we're excited about that as well, because it really is kind of a breath of fresh air for this publication to come forward.
Yeah, well, that's really exciting. She's been doing some events around the book, and one of the projects is on the Lower East Side, and she had a panel with 8 of the people who were involved in the project. And, it was just going to be an author talk, and she felt like she couldn't really talk about this project without bringing in the actors who were actually involved in it. And it was really interesting. And it's just, I agree that it's more of it is needed. We also have a recent book called The Divided City by Alan Moloch, which looks at cities that have been resurging. Many of them are industrial cities like Cleveland, St. Louis, Pittsburgh, and how we hear quite a bit about the areas that are resurging, but people aren't talking about or don't understand what is happening to the lower income communities. Many of them are not benefiting from the resurgence, and some of them are actually slipping further into decline. So it sort of pulls back the curtain on that and looks at how these cities are being affected as a whole. And it's generally lower income people of color who are not benefiting, or again, actually just having resources diverted from the communities. So there are a lot of interesting things coming out right now.
I have coming up near the end, so unless someone puts in a question, I actually have two last questions, and these are kind of dream questions, if you will.
Oh.
So first and foremost, who is the author or the individual, whether educational elected official, that you would love to publish a book with Island?
Do I have to pick one?
You can pick
no, just kidding. I've been thinking about someone like Anthony Fox. I think would be really interesting in his role as in the federal administration, as transportation director, his role as mayor of Charlotte, like hearing about, he's one of the first people in his role in the federal government who was talking about issues of race and social equity. And I think he's a really engaging speaker and is thinking about, or at least talking about, these issues in a way that I hadn't heard for someone at his level. And he comes to mind because we had just been reaching out to him. Gosh, it's hard to Sky's the limit, excuse me. I'm trying to think of superstars. I mean, there are so many people doing interesting work. Maurice Cox is another one, the planning director in Detroit, who also worked in New Orleans post Katrina and was mayor of Charlottesville. Like people who have this experience working with communities that feel as though they have been left behind and don't have a voice, and are talking about resilience issues in a different way. And would provide that different perspective, that we were talking about earlier. I think it'd be really engaging. The challenge with, we find this with working with many professionals, is that they don't have the time very often to sit down and think about writing a book. And some of them we have been talking to about short form pieces, but you almost have to go, and have someone follow them around and talk to them and write about their experience and what they feel we can do to inspire change and change the way that people think about the environment and then about how we design and plan our cities. Yeah, I'm gonna have to think about that more. I mean, every editor has a list in their head of people that they'd like to work with. It's hard for me to pick this one, think about that one dream person. I feel like I've been very fortunate to work with people like Jan Gell and some leaders in the field. And now Jeff Speck is someone who I've been talking to for years. So if you had asked me that question a year ago, he's one person I might have mentioned. So I'm really happy to be working with him. But Mindy Fololov is another who's been working on public health issues and looking at, really working at the intersection between public health and the built environment. Yeah, so those are the first three that come to mind.
For those of you, Anthony Fox was actually the second Secretary of Transportation under President Obama's second term. And one of the things as well that is kind of a big legacy of his is the fact that he commissioned research on the historical negative effects of highways and freeways in inner cities. And it's just wonderful to read. Well, it's not wonderful, sorry. It's interesting to read how that one piece of infrastructure has really destroyed social environments.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely. CNU had a program for, I think they still have it, but it was really under John Norquist, on highway teardowns. Um, and thinking about how to, weave the urban fabric once a highway that bisects the city is removed, like they did in Portland and San Francisco.
yeah, it is interesting because there's another discussion right now in the Bay Area and in San Francisco about removing two portions of freeways. One, Interstate 280 in San Francisco, a portion of it where it ends in the northern part of the city, and then also Interstate 87 in San Jose. And there's actually a lot of resistance to it. But the funny thing is, the pinnacle case study is actually in San Francisco. The transformation of the city when they removed the Embarcadero Freeway has just, I mean, nowadays you can't even imagine that there was a freeway where there used to be along the Embarcadero, because the views that you have now, the connection to the waterfront and so forth is so great. The idea of a freeway being there is just kind of gross. So it's interesting that we do see these debates going on saying, the end of the world if you tear down these freeways. It's like, really? Because history shows otherwise.
I know, and enough studies have been done to show that it doesn't cause congestion, significant congestion in other parts of the city, which is always what people seem to be concerned about. But anyway, so yeah.
Yeah, the interesting thing is actually it relieves congestion, which I find funny.
I know people, but yeah, I think it's just counterintuitive to people. They just think it's going to be disruptive. Yeah. So
last question. What book do you dream of writing about? And you can even mention being a ghostwriter for Anthony Fox.
I would love to be a ghostwriter for Anthony Fox. I dream of writing about. Wow, I really I think that there is definitely a need for a book that talks about why, or researches and really investigates why we are willing to put up with these fatalities and with traffic violence, I guess. And there's an interesting book written years ago that looked at the drunk driving movement and the grassroots efforts, and how people used to think, just even if someone had been killed by a drunk driver, it was just sort of the cost of doing business, and how groups like MAD and other grassroots groups changed the way that we think about drunk driving, and how, I think about what could we write about that would change how people think about driving. And I think that's even more critical as everyone's talking about autonomous vehicles and what what it means to give our cities over to cars from a safety perspective, primarily, and also, talk about other things that the car brings, but other people have certainly written about the detrimental effects of designing a city around cars. There hasn't been that much that is focused on that safety issue, and it's just amazing to see how people justify the level of violence that we experience from cars, just as the cost of we call it their freedom. In being able to drive wherever we want. So that's something I guess I would do if I had a year to go write a book.
I find that incredibly interesting because despite being born and raised in Los Angeles, I actually do not have a driver's license, and I have no intentions. Yeah, I have no intentions.
You're a unicorn.
Thank you. No intentions of getting a license. Next month I'll turn 35, and I just do not have any. And I explain to people, it's actually safer for transit. And a lot of people don't believe that, because when transit experiences a fatality, it's usually a good deal of people who have been, affected by that incident. But the thing is, what's interesting, in 2016, the latest figures available, so we actually have that increase in fatalities. I believe it was almost 36,000 died from the, driving and so forth, but there was less than 400 fatalities on transit.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to figure out, why is it that people don't understand, or maybe strategically choose to ignore those figures?
I know. I find it fascinating too. That's the way that people compute that information. So, all right, we could work on this book on our next sabbatical.
Oh, awesome. Perfect. All right. Well, it's getting to the end of the time. I cannot thank you enough for speaking to us. Incredibly grateful for it. A lot of the stuff you mentioned was just amazing. And if you can, please go ahead and pick up your book, Resilient Cities, the second edition, a wonderful book. We have featured it on Transportica's book club as well. And then was there anything else you wanted to add as well?
No, just a thank you for inviting me to speak today. It's been fun and interesting.
Oh, we appreciate it. Thanks. All right. Well, thank you so much, folks. Thank you for joining us. And we will send this, the edited version of the recording out with about an hour or so. So thank you so much for joining us.
Wonderful. Thank you. Bye-bye.